The thermal scope didn't lie. It was over 7 feet tall, standing perfectly still in the freezing river, and it was staring right back at me. It wasn't until it tilted its head and smiled that I realized it knew exactly what the red glow meant. Nightbound Bloodline presents 5 scary new Bigfoot documentary stories. For centuries, every culture with deep forests has whispered of a giant, hairy being that walks the line between man and beast. We call it Bigfoot, Sasquatch, the wild man. Many dismiss it as folklore, a comforting campfire scare. But what happens when the campfire goes out and the story doesn't end? When a person of sound mind and sober senses steps into the twilight and meets something that shatters their understanding of the natural world. The accounts you are about to hear are not fiction. They are documented experiences sent to us by ordinary people who have stepped into the extraordinary shadow of something they cannot explain. Listen closely. The woods are not always empty. Story 1. The Smile and the Thermal. Our first document comes from a man we'll call James, a 42-year-old surveyor from Oregon, a man whose job is to measure, to quantify, to map the world in precise, logical detail. My name is James. I'm a land surveyor. I've spent more days in the backcountry of the Pacific Northwest than I have in my own living room. My work is based on fact, on fixed points, on immutable data. I don't believe in ghost stories. I believe in bedrock. At least I did. This happened last November, up in the Willamette National Forest. I was on a 2-week solo job, prepping a site for a new forestry access road. Remote doesn't even begin to cover it. The setup was normal. My camp was a small nylon tent, a propane stove, the usual. The silence out there, it's not like town silence. It's a living thing, full of little sounds, the chatter of squirrels, the wind in the fir tops. That first week was textbook. Then, the weather turned. A cold snap rolled in, the kind that makes the trees crack like gunshots. That's when the normal sound stopped. Not all at once, but over 2 days. The woods went sterile. No birds, no squirrels, just the wind and that feeling. You know the one. The feeling that the empty space around you is full. The third night of the silence, I heard the first knock. It wasn't a branch falling. It was a deep, resonant thom from a ridge about a quarter-mile west. Solid, intentional. A few minutes later, an answer came from the east. Closer. Tum. My blood went cold. I've heard woodpeckers. I've heard ice splitting rock. This was different. It was communication. I had a thermal imaging monocular in my kit, part of my safety gear for spotting animals in the dark. I fumbled for it, my hands numb from more than just the cold. I scanned the tree line. Nothing but the cool blues and blacks of the night. Then I panned across the creek, a shallow, rocky run about 50 yards from my tent. And there it was, a massive, brilliant white-hot signature standing midstream. Humanoid, but wrong. The proportions. The shoulders were impossibly broad, tapering to a narrower waist. The arms were too long, hanging past its knees. It was just standing there, facing my camp, the freezing water flowing around its calves as if they were stone pillars. My breath caught. I wasn't seeing things. The thermal doesn't imagine. It reads heat. And this thing was alive, burning with a core temperature that dwarfed the surrounding landscape. I watched, paralyzed, as it slowly raised one of those long arms. It didn't move like a man. It was too fluid, too powerful. It pointed a single, thick finger directly at my tent. At me. Then, it began to walk. It came out of the water onto my side of the bank, moving with a terrifying, effortless grace. It didn't lumber. It stalked. I could see the heat bloom in its muscles as it moved. It stopped at the edge of the clearing, maybe 30 yards out, partially obscured by a stand of young hemlocks. I could see the bright corona of its head, the dark patches where its eyes would be. It was watching me. I knew it. The sheer, predatory intelligence in that stance was undeniable. I had a rifle. A 30-06 for bear protection. But pointing it felt like a suicidal provocation. This wasn't a bear. This was something that understood what a gun was. So I did the only thing I could think of. I turned the thermal scope directly on it, the lens glowing with a faint red LED reticle. I wanted a clearer look, a detail to rationalize later. The creature went perfectly still. It had seen the red glow. Then, slowly, it leaned forward, just enough for its head to clear the hemlock branches. The thermal signature of its face was a mask of white and hotter white. And as I watched, the heat signature around its jaw shifted. The hot spot of its maw widened, the edges curling upward. It was tilting its head. It was smiling. A wide, knowing, horrific grin aimed directly at the little red eye of my scope. It wasn't a fear response. It was recognition. A challenge. It was telling me, as clear as if it had spoken, "I see you too." I dropped the scope. I didn't run. Running is what prey does. I backed into my tent, zipped the flap, and sat there all night with my back against the tent pole, my knife in my hand, listening to the heavy, circling footsteps just outside the thin nylon wall. It never made a sound, but I could feel its weight compress the ground. I could smell it, a suffocating mix of wet dog, dank earth, and something else, something sweet and rotten, like old blood and compost. At first light, the footsteps were gone. The smell remained. I packed my camp in under 3 minutes, leaving half my gear behind. I hiked 16 miles to the nearest Forestry Service station without stopping. I filed no report. What would I say? I showed the thermal scope's memory card to the ranger, a friend of mine. The footage was just gray static. He said moisture must have gotten into the unit. But I know what I saw. The thermal didn't lie. It showed me the heat of a living thing. And that thing saw me back. I haven't surveyed a deep forest since. I stick to county lines and property borders now. Places where the world is still measured and the things in it don't smile in the dark. James submitted his story along with a copy of his surveyor's license and the corrupted thermal file. The technician he spoke to later confirmed the memory card showed signs of electromagnetic corruption, a phenomenon sometimes reported in close encounters. But for James, no technical explanation can erase the memory of that intelligent, smiling heat signature in the freezing water. Story 2. The Mimic on Mount St. Helens. Our second account takes us to the blast zone of Mount St. Helens, a landscape reborn from volcanic fury. Our witness is Maya, a 28-year-old geologist with a master's degree in volcanology. Her world is one of deep time, pressure, and stone. I'm Maya. I study rocks. I trust what I can hold in my hand, what I can test in a lab. The supernatural is just bad data waiting for a proper explanation. Last summer, I was part of a 3-person team collecting pumice and ash samples from the 1980 eruption zone. It's a surreal place, silent, gray, almost lunar. Our base was a hardened research hut about 5 miles from the crater's rim. The first oddity was the rocks. We'd lay out our sample grids in the morning, and by afternoon, they'd be disturbed. Not by wind or animals. Specific, marked stones would be moved, sometimes stacked into simple, unstable pyramids. My colleagues joked about volcano ghosts. I blamed ravens, though I never saw any. Then, the voices started. We'd be out in the field, and I'd hear my team leader, Dr. Evans, call my name from behind a ridge of lava rock. "Maya, over here, look at this." I'd go, and he'd be a half-mile in the opposite direction, confused. He said he'd heard my voice calling for him. This happened for 2 days. It was an eerie, disorienting game of auditory tag, but we wrote it off as the strange acoustics of the terrain. The tipping point was the 3rd night. I was alone in the hut. The others were at a lower camp collecting supplies. A storm was rolling in, and the wind was howling down the crater like a freight train. That's when I heard the knock on the door. 3 heavy, spaced thuds. Not the wind. I froze. Our protocol is strict. No one should be out there alone at night, especially in that weather. Then Dr. Evans's voice, clear as day, right outside the door. "Maya, open up. I'm soaked, my radio's dead." He sounded panicked, breathless. My hand was on the latch, but something was off. The cadence. Dr. Evans has a slight stutter when he's stressed. This voice was flawlessly smooth, and it was too perfect. It was his voice, but empty of the little warmth, the personality. It was a recording. I stayed silent. The thing outside went quiet. Then, it tried my colleague Sarah's voice. "Maya, it's me. Please, I'm hurt." This time, the voice was coming from the small, reinforced window to the left of the door. I didn't move. I couldn't. I just stared at the door's metal frame, praying. What happened next? I will hear it until I die. The voice changed. It dropped the imitation. What came out was a guttural, wet, bubbling sound that somehow formed words. It wasn't yelling. It was a deep, whispered roar that cut through the storm. "Let me in." The door handle rattled, not with a turn, but with a single, massive impact, like a body had been thrown against it. The solid steel door shook in its frame. Then another impact, and another. I backed into the far corner, clutching a rock hammer, watching the door bulge inward with each blow. The thing was screaming now, a raw, jagged sound of pure fury that didn't sound animal or human. It was the sound of the mountain itself screaming. Just as suddenly as it started, it stopped. The silence was absolute, save for the weeping wind. I didn't sleep. At dawn, my team found me still in the corner. Outside the door, in the fresh volcanic ash, were footprints. They were bipedal, easily 18 inches long and 8 inches wide. They came from the tree lean, went to the door, and then they just stopped. There were no tracks leading away. It was as if whatever made them had vanished into thin air. We evacuated that day. My career in field volcanology is over. I work in a museum now, with rocks that are safely behind glass. I have the audio recording from the hut's security system. It picked up the knocks, the perfect mimicry, and that final guttural command. The audio engineer who analyzed it said the vocal patterns are biomechanically impossible for a human throat to produce. He had no explanation. I have one. Something lives in that dead zone. Something that doesn't just walk. It listens, and it learns. The recording Maya mentions remains in our possession. Analysis confirmed her description, a flawless mimicry shifting into a vocalization that defies known biology. It is a haunting document from one of America's most desolate landscapes. Story 3. The Gift at Grafton's Fence. Our journey now takes us to the dense, rolling hills of West Virginia. This account comes from Elijah, a 67-year-old retired coal miner and lifelong farmer. His family has worked the same land since the 1800s. His is a world of tradition, hard work, and the quiet understanding of the land that only generations can bring. Name's Elijah. I farm the same plot my granddaddy farmed. I've seen black bears, coyotes, the occasional mountain lion passing through. I know the sounds of my land. I don't truck with television stories about monsters. But there's an old rule here, passed down from my grandpappy to my pappy to me. You don't speak ill of the forest folk, and you don't go poking around the deep hollers after sundown. I always thought it was just superstition, a way to keep kids from getting lost. This past autumn, my best hound, Old Blue, went missing. Not like him. He was a tracker, smart as a whip. I found his trail leading down into a steep, overgrown hollow we call the Sorrow, on account of a tragedy that happened there way back. I went in after him, my shotgun loaded with salt rock, just in case. The deeper I went, the colder it got. The light just drained away, like the trees were swallowing it. And it got quiet. No birds, no insects. Just the sound of my own breathing. I found Blue tucked under a rock shelf, whimpering, his tail between his legs. He wasn't hurt, just scared clean out of his mind. As I bent to get him, I smelled it. Like a wet dog that had rolled in a bed of crushed pine needles and something coppery. My neck prickled. I looked up. On the ridge above me, maybe 40 feet up, stood a figure. It was tall and shaggy, darker than the shadows around it. It wasn't a bear standing up. Bears don't stand that still. and they don't have shoulders like a man who has spent his life swinging a pickaxe. It just watched. I couldn't see its eyes, but I felt them. Heavy, curious, not mean, exactly, but assessing, like it was deciding what I was. I didn't raise my gun. Some instinct deeper than fear told me that'd be the worst thing I could do. I just tipped my old cap, slow-like. "Just retrieving my dog," I said, my voice barely a whisper. Ain't meaning no trouble. It didn't move. I scooped up Blue and backed out of that hollow, never turning my back on the ridge. I could feel that gaze on me the whole way until I broke through the tree line into the lower pasture. I thought that was the end of it. A strange sighting, nothing more. Then, 2 mornings later, I found it. At the far corner of my property line, where my fence meets the wild woods, there was a bundle. It was laid neat on a flat stone. 3 of the biggest, most perfect morel mushrooms I'd ever seen, their honeycomb caps firm and fresh. Next to them was a perfect arrowhead, the kind you don't find anymore, made of a dark, glossy flint. And beside that was one of my own red handkerchiefs, the one I'd lost from my back pocket the week before. It was folded clean. A gift, a trade. For my respect? For old Blue's life? I don't know, but it was intentional. This wasn't some animal leaving a kill. This was an arrangement. Acknowledgement. I took the mushrooms and the arrowhead. I left a small, shiny pocket knife from my youth on the same stone in return. The next day, the knife was gone. Now, every full moon, I leave a little something at that fence corner. A bit of smoked meat, a shiny trinket. And sometimes, come morning, there'll be something there for me. A beautiful feather. A piece of quartz with a crystal inside. Once, a single, massive canine tooth, old and yellowed. I don't go into the sorrow anymore. But we have an understanding, me and whatever lives there. The old rules weren't superstition. They were a treaty, and I aim to keep my end of it. The woods have tenants, you see, and sometimes the rent comes due in strange currency. Story 4. The Things in the Storm. Our 4th story emerges not from deep wilderness, but from its encroaching edge. This is the account of Daniel and Sophie, a young couple from Washington State who sought a quiet life in a wooded subdivision. Their document is a reminder that these phenomena are not confined to untouched wilderness, but sometimes follow the scent of human expansion. We just moved in. It was our dream, a modern A-frame at the end of a cul-de-sac, backing onto a protected greenbelt. The realtor called it secluded. The first month was paradise. Then the clear-cutting started a few miles over for a new development. The noise was constant. That's when the visitors began. I'm an IT project manager. I troubleshoot problems. At first, it was just nuisance stuff. Trash cans knocked over. Strange, 3-toed prints in the flower beds that the rain washed away before I could get a photo. Our dog, a fearless German shepherd, would stand at the tree line at night and just growl, low and steady, for hours. Then she'd whimper and hide under the bed. The night of the storm was the worst. It was an atmospheric river, rain coming down in sheets, wind shaking the whole house. The power went out around midnight. We lit candles, and that's when the knocking started. Not on the door, on the walls. A slow, deliberate tap, 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 moving around the perimeter of the house. From the living room wall, to the bedroom, to the sliding glass door in the back. I grabbed a flashlight, shone it out the back door. The beam cut through the rain, and I saw them. 2 of them, just standing at the edge of the tree line. They were massive, darker than the night, the rain sheeting off their matted fur. They weren't hunching against the storm. They were standing erect, facing the house. And they were close. Too close. Then the smell came in. Even with the doors closed, it seeped through the vents, wet fur and mud, and something acidic, like rotten lemons and hot metal. It was the smell of aggression, of territory being contested. The knocking turned into pounding. A heavy, meaty thump against the siding. The whole wall would vibrate. They weren't trying to get in. They were demonstrating that they could. I called 911. What could I say? There are monsters in my backyard. The dispatcher heard the banging over the phone, the sound of our dog barking hysterically, and sent a car. The moment we saw the blue and red flashes through the front window, the pounding stopped. The smell began to fade. By the time the two deputies walked around back with their high-beam flashlights, there was nothing, just churned up mud and our shattered patio furniture. One of the deputies, an older guy, shined his light into the woods for a long time. He came back to us, his face grim. He didn't say bear or teenagers. He just said, "You folks might want to think about getting a security system with some good exterior lights. And maybe don't leave pet food outside." The way he said it, he knew. He'd seen this before. We sold the house at a loss 6 weeks later. The new owners are a family with 3 loud kids and 2 big Rottweilers. I wonder if they hear the knocking. I wonder if their dogs growl at the tree line. We live in a high-rise apartment in the city now. No yard, no trees, just concrete and streetlights. Sophie still sleeps with the bathroom light on. I still jump at sudden noises. They weren't in the wilderness. They were in our backyard. And I think we built our dream home in their kitchen, and they wanted us to know it. Daniel and Sophie's experience is a chilling modern archetype, the clash between suburban sprawl and ancient inhabitants. The deputy's tacit acknowledgement is a thread found in many law enforcement reports from rural and semi-rural areas, a professional understanding of something that officially does not exist. Story 5. The Signal from the Sierra Silence. Our final document is perhaps the most unsettling, as it intertwines the physical with the inexplicable. It comes from Leo, a 34-year-old former signals intelligence analyst for the U.S. Army, a man trained to find patterns in noise, to extract meaning from chaos. His story challenges not just what we know of biology, but of reality itself. My name is Leo. For 8 years, my job was to sit in a dark room and listen, to separate enemy communications from the static of the world. I am very, very good at identifying patterns. And I am even better at identifying when a pattern is artificial. This isn't a campfire story. This is a report. After my service, I took up extreme solo backpacking, a way to decompress, to find real silence. My destination last May was a remote basin in the high Sierras, accessible only by a 2-day hike, off any established trail. My goal was total disconnection. I brought a notebook, supplies, and as a personal quirk, a modified shortwave radio receiver. Old habit. The mountains create strange atmospheric skip. Sometimes you can pick up radio stations from across the globe. It's a harmless curiosity. The first 2 days were pristine. Absolute solitude. On the third evening, as I set up camp by an alpine lake, the silence deepened. Not peacefully. It became a vacuum. That's when my radio, which was powered off, crackled to life. Not with voices or music, with a low, rhythmic pulsing. Tap, pause, tap, tap, long pause, tap. It was Morse code. Slow, deliberate, and coming from no broadcast source I could triangulate. It was just in the air. I recorded it on my phone. My training kicked in. I decoded it. It was a simple, repeating loop, a void. The red eyes. I shut the radio off. My skin was crawling. That was no atmospheric anomaly. That was a directed signal, a warning, or bait. That night, the tree line across the lake erupted with whoops and howls. Not coyotes. These were deeper, layered sounds, a cacophony that sounded like a dozen different creatures, yet somehow in sync. It was a performance, a display, and through my binoculars, I saw the silhouettes. At least 4 of them, moving on 2 legs along the ridge, backlit by the rising moon. They were herding something, a group of deer, panicking them into a stampede directly away from their position. It was coordinated hunting behavior, primate-level intelligence. I packed to leave at first light. As I hiked out, the feeling of being watched was a physical pressure. I'd stop, hear nothing. I'd move, and the crunch of a branch would echo mine a half-second later from the woods to my left. Perfect mimicry of my pace. It was toying with me. Then I found the structure. In a small, hidden meadow was a configuration. 8-foot-long logs, too heavy for a man to move alone, stacked in a precise spiral pattern, like a fractal. In the center was a mound of stones, and on top of the stones were objects. A broken wristwatch, a tarnished silver locket, a vintage compass, and my own, cheap, plastic comb I dropped the day before. It was a collection, a shrine, or a database. That's when I saw the watcher. It was crouched on a boulder at the meadow's edge, partially obscured by pines. It wasn't like the shaggy ones from stories. Its fur was shorter, a grizzled gray-brown, almost like a gorilla's. Its face was flatter, and its eyes, I'll never forget. They weren't reflective. They were a deep, solid, burning red, like hot coals. Not a glow from within, but a solid color that seemed to absorb the light around it. The eyes from the signal. It didn't move. It just stared with those impossible red orbs. It held something in its long-fingered hand, a piece of dark rock. It raised the rock to its temple, then pointed it directly at me. A gesture, a symbol, a threat. I don't know. I ran. I didn't stop for 8 hours. I've analyzed the recording of that Morse code signal 1,000 times. The pulse pattern doesn't match any known terrestrial broadcasting method. The frequency was one typically used for deep space satellite telemetry. And the audio signature. There are anomalies in the waveform that audio engineers can't explain. They call it structured noise. I didn't just see a creature. I interacted with a phenomenon. One that communicates in code, hunts with strategy, builds geometric structures, and collects artifacts of human passage. One that may not be of this earth, or at least, not of our understanding of it. I've submitted my findings to 3 different research groups. They either call me a hoaxer or stop responding after they review the data. The signal was real. The structure was real. The red eyes were real. We are not just sharing a planet with a hidden species. We may be sharing it with an intelligence that is watching, learning, and cataloging us from the shadows of places we call empty. 5 stories, 5 landscapes, from frozen rivers and volcanic deserts to suburban fences and alpine basins. Each witness different, each account unique in its details, yet bound by common threads. The profound intelligence in the gaze, the violation of natural law, the lingering smell of wet earth and musk, and the irreversible alteration of a human life. James, the surveyor, encountered a being that understood technology. Maya, the geologist, faced a mimic that weaponized sound. Elijah, the farmer, found not a monster, but a neighbor with its own ancient etiquette. Daniel and Sophie met aggressive territorial occupants. And Leo, the signals analyst, grappled with something that may transcend the category of animal entirely. These are not random monster sightings. They are interactions. They suggest a consciousness that observes, calculates, and sometimes intentionally intersects with our world. Whether they are a remnant hominid, a spirit of the wild, or something else entirely remains the greatest mystery. But the evidence is no longer just in footprints or blurry photos. It is in the corrupted data, the impossible audio, the curated collections of trinkets, and the shattered peace of mind of credible people. These documents from the edge of understanding compel us to ask, in our rush to map every inch of the globe, have we forgotten to listen to the old warnings? Are the deepest woods and highest mountains not voids to be filled, but domains to be respected? The witnesses you heard tonight would tell you yes. Their lives are the testament. If you have a story, a document, an experience that lives in this shadowed space between the known and the unknowable, we invite you to share it in the comments below. Your account could be the next piece of the puzzle. If you found this journey into the dark corners of the map compelling, please like this video, subscribe to Nightbound Bloodline, and hit the notification bell. We delve deep so you don't have to. Thank you for listening. Until next time, sleep with one eye open.